Welcome to the Amazing Authorities Podcast, where game changers, visionaries, and category leaders share how they built their brands, platforms, and global influence. Your host is Mitch Carson, international speaker, media strategist, and creator of the Instant Authority System. If you're ready to learn from those who've done it and want to become the go-to expert in your space, you're in the right place.
I was born ready, and I think our guest today, Terry Whalin, was born ready because he's here enthusiastically as I am. We're both gentlemen that are in the 50-plus club. I won't even add any more digits than that. And we're here together sharing a passion about books and publishing. And we have very similar educational backgrounds and then some differences that I want to bring up for you. Terry, welcome to the Amazing Authorities podcast today.
Mitch, it's incredible to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, and you said something in our pre-interview before the formal interview, and I hit the record button, that I think is a golden nugget. And it summarizes everything when it comes to books. Do you recall the statement you said, books blank blank?
Yeah, books change people's lives.
And, yeah, all right. I missed one of the blanks.
That's why I'm in publishing.
Books change lives. Yeah, I think those were the three words, but you added the people's part. That's good because I think it doesn't change dogs' lives, but it does change people's lives. And we're of the same ilk, same mindset when it comes to that, because it is something you get a big smile from readers who actually consume your information, which is rare these days. If they actually read your book, I think the statistic is 5% of the books sold actually get consumed cover to cover. Isn't it something like that? You would know better than me. You've got this deep, deep publishing background. Is that a fair statistic, do you think?
I think that's fair. People buy a lot of books that they never read, which comes with the territory. But books are very important, and they're still out there and still changing people's lives and all that. That's why I do this stuff every day. So yeah.
And you've written how many books? I want people to hear the.
I've written over 60 books for traditional publishers. Two of the books that I wrote, Mitch, received six-figure advances actually, and several of my books have sold over 100,000 copies that I've written. So
okay,
yeah,
wow, wow, that's amazing. And today you work for a hybrid publisher called Morgan James, which I'm familiar with, Dave Hancock.
Yeah, they are one of the top independent publishers in the country. We've been around 21 years. We've sold over 20 million books, published over 6,000 titles. So yeah, there's a lot going on at the publishing house, that's for sure.
And you said one particular book you read when you were young changed your life and the trajectory of your life. What was that book?
Yeah, Mitch, that was a book that I read called Jesus the Revolutionary. I went to Indiana University, studied journalism. I joined the college newspaper, sat there shoulder to shoulder with somebody else, cranking out a story on an old Royal typewriter. And I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. And I kept muttering to myself, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me, she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what is this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. She sent me down to this little bookstore a couple of blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters, and I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And I took that book back to my room. I read that book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. About that time, somebody invited me to this Jesus people gathering in downtown Bloomington. They were sitting on little scraps of carpets and little candles lit. Those people had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible, and I've been going the Jesus trail with my life ever since. Instead of becoming a big newspaper reporter, that's what I thought I was going to do. I joined Wycliffe Bible Translators. I spent 17 years with those guys, and that's why I have a New Testament in the Southwest Kaqchikel language from Guatemala on my shelf that I worked on back then.
And you wrote that?
I didn't write it, but I worked with the nationals that ultimately did the translation work. It's in Spanish and in Southwest Kaqchikel.
Kaqchikel, which is a totally different language of the natives.
It's one of the Mayan languages in Guatemala. Yes.
Jeez, that's so cool. And I mean, to experience that, because I share with people, I've lived in 7 different countries in my life, traveled to 63. I believe, and this is a strong assertion, the most interesting people are the most well-traveled, because you have a lot more to talk about, a lot more experiences to share and to raise humanity.
I agree. I think that travel experience gives you something very different to talk with other people about, for sure.
Well, it also creates a sense of understanding. I live in Thailand. I'm calling in from Thailand. You're in the US. And I mean, that's the beauty of technology today. But when I first came here in 2010, 15 years ago, oh my word, we couldn't have been from different countries. We were from different worlds. The culture is so vastly different than the Western way. I'm from Los Angeles, and that in itself has its own culture. You're from Indiana. That in itself has its own culture. Not that different than LA per se, same language, same religion, etc., but culturally slightly different. How Indiana people handle themselves versus LA. It happens because of geography. But when you go way overseas, and I mean on an airplane more than, a few hours, man, that's a big change. And then when you had to embrace a different language entirely, let's say 2 languages removed. How did you bridge that gap? And then to be able to write about it?
Well, yeah, it was a great experience. And, I had to learn Spanish first, and then Kaqchikel, which is a whole different language, but it was a great experience to be able to do that kind of thing.
Now, was Kaqchikel one of these languages that was only verbal, or did it also have a written language?
It did not have a written language back then.
Okay.
So we developed the alphabet, worked with them to develop the alphabet, all the basic reading materials, all that kind of thing, to get the New Testament into their language.
Wow, that's great.
28 minority languages in Guatemala. So yeah.
Oh my word. But the national language is Spanish, which they all communicate. Okay, they all communicate in that. And then there are the tribal. I know I spent time in the Philippines, 1.5 years total. And the national language is Tagalog. And then there are all those tribal languages which differ tremendously. People who speak Tagalog only from Manila have no clue what people are saying in Cebu.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a whole different language. And I'm looking at it like, what? They don't understand any more than I do. So, it's very interesting. So what have you found writing your first, how old were you when you wrote your first book?
Oh, I don't know. It was in 1992. So, 40 years ago. So yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to ask how old you were. I was trying to find out. Yeah. So you wrote it. So a long time ago, you wrote your
30 years ago. 30 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. 30 years ago. And so that 30 years ago. God, my math is bad.
I was in my 40s back then.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wrote this first book, and what was that topic?
It was a little children's book that I did. I was at a writers conference, Mitch, and I went out to walk with an editor there, and she told me she had a problem. And so I always listen when these editors tell me they have a problem. She said, Terry, I have all these children's books that we're publishing at David C. Cook, and our mission as a company is to challenge people and tell children that there's a whole world out there where they need to go. We don't have a single book that talks about that topic. What kind of ideas do you have? And back then, my kids were little, and so I was reading a lot of children's books to them. And I knew that Stephen Lawhead, who writes fantasy, had this series of children's books that he'd done for Lion called Howard Had a Hot Air Balloon, Howard Had a Spaceship, that combined real pictures with a little cartoon character to show kids, to help them imagine it. And so I said, what if we used our real pictures from Wycliffe and combined them with a little cartoon character to help kids with their imagination? She said, oh, that's a good idea. Write that up and send that to me. And so I went home and wrote it up and I sent it to her. And I mean, we went back and forth quite a bit, but that ultimately became my first little book that was published in 1992, a little children's book that I did called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. And I covered 5 different occupations. Like the pilot, for example, he said, we fly everything from pigs to presidents. That's what he said in this book. And so that's what started me on this whole book thing that I've been doing here. It's great.
And so you wrote a fictional book to start. Have you written nonfiction, or did you start with fiction and stay?
Well, no, that book was really a nonfiction book because it was about nonfiction occupations. It was a children's book, though.
Okay, children's book.
All my books have been nonfiction, and I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers, Mitch, and I had a little literary agency in Arizona, and Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author for Chicken Soup for the Soul, invited me to come out to Los Angeles. He was having this big event called Mega Book Marketing University.
I was there.
You were there. Well, I was there too.
Yeah, so, I was there. I spoke at Mega Marketing also.
Oh, you were there. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. I spoke there years ago.
So in 2007, I was out there, and there were 400 people that were there, and I was getting my royalty statements on these books that I'd written, and they were all in the minus category. That none of them were making any money. And so I thought, I must be doing something wrong here. And so I listened to all the speakers, and one of the speakers was Jack Canfield.
I know Jack.
Jack's written this book called The Success Principles.
With Janet Schweitzer. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success.
Yep.
Well, it's almost like I woke up during that conference because I realized how little I was doing to promote my own books. I mean, sure, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I wasn't doing anything else. And so publishers were making pretty books. They were getting them in the bookstores, but I wasn't doing my part to be telling people about my books. So I said, I'm going to change. I'm going to do something different. And so back then I started blogging. And, I'm still blogging, Mitch. I started my blog in, I think, 2004, and I've written over 1,700 entries in my blog. And so I found an article about that listed about a year ago, listed the top 27 content producers. I mean, it says there's over 600 million blogs out there. And I was one of the top 27. And it's not that I do anything magical here. I blog every week and I've been doing it for years. And that builds up this huge amount of content out there. So people know about me. They know about that I have this blog called The Writing Life that I do every week.
And you still write for it?
I still write for it every week. Yeah.
That in itself,
today.
that in itself could be a compilation of books in a series.
Because
I tell people that, and I one of the topics that I'm going to write about with my podcast, which is essentially a different variety of blog, is a compilation of stories, maybe a synopsis of each of the interviews that I've done, which is now over 120, is a series of books about the gems from Terry Whalin, the gems from Mark Victor Hansen, who I haven't interviewed yet, but Mark's an old friend because I,
Sure.
his platforms, he's spoken on mine, and so on and so forth. Authors could be one volume. I mean, for you, I don't know if you interviewed people or commented about others in your blog,
I
but that
have.
itself,
I
oh,
have.
I'm sure those are books waiting to be published.
They could be. They sure could be. Yes.
And then you've had, so what did you do fundamentally? I know that the not mindset shift happened from what was in Jack's book along with Janet Schweitzer. I mean, she was the major writer of that book.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and I know Janet personally very well. And smart woman and a great writer, prolific. And she had some great principles in there. Jack had some great principles. After the mental shift, what were the tactical steps?
The tactical steps that I did, is something again I gained from Jack. Jack talks about following the rule of five that they did with the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. They got up every day and they did 5 things to be telling people about their book. And it took them a year and a half to sell the first 1,000,000 copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And but every day they did 5 different things, and to be telling people about their book. They did a blog post, a podcast, a radio show, a newspaper article, something. There's dozens of things you can do. And so that's what I learned, is that I have to be doing something all the time to be telling people about my book, like on this podcast or on a radio show or social media. There's all kinds of things. So when social media came along, I joined that. That's why I have 175,000 followers on X, Twitter. I have 19,500 connections on LinkedIn. I mean, those things really matter. People read that stuff out there. And
they
so
certainly do.
we should be involved in that. It doesn't have to consume your life and take gobs of time to do that, but I'm certainly active on those different platforms.
Have you leveraged any of the platforms like Entrepreneur Press, being involved as a paid writer for those? Like they have it's called ELN, Entrepreneurial Leadership Network, and then their Forbes has a council where you pay, but you leverage that prestige of those. And I've seen some writers do that effectively to get their name out. Okay, no,
I haven't done that kind of thing. No, my thing has barely been more organic and more using newsletters and things like that I've done.
How about Substack?
I've tried Substack, but I didn't get much traction on it per se. So maybe I didn't give it enough time, but all of us are limited the number of things that we can do. So we just have to figure out which is the right one for us out there.
Yeah. And YouTube, do you leverage YouTube at all?
Not much. I've leveraged print magazines and a lot of those kinds of things have worked for me. I've done all kinds of things, postcards, bookmarks, all kinds of things.
Okay. Or Booksprout. Have you used that for books? No,
I've not.
Not
No,
for reviews. Well, how important are reviews for books?
Reviews are very important. And that's why I've written over 1,000 reviews on Amazon, 900 reviews on Goodreads. Yeah, they're important. They're important for you to gather them, but also for you as a writer to do them, to encourage other people and to get those out there.
And you've had some tremendous success with some of your books. Like you said, you had a couple 6-figure advances. That's unheard of unless you are a major name. For somebody that's newer, how did you get to that point?
Part of what happens with that are the co-authors that I hooked up with. I was actually the writer for these higher profile people that garnered the 6-figure advance. So that's another strategy, that if you want to get something like that, that's something that any of us as writers can do. Just get hooked up with a higher profile person that can actually get that type of advance.
So somebody has a big following. Let's just talk Mel Robbins as an example. She's one of the very big books right now, or James Clear. I think he sold 20 million copies of his book, Atomic Habits. You would go to somebody like him if he didn't have the ability to write per se. If he just had a great following as a speaker or as a celebrity, and you went to this person and said, "Let me ghostwrite or let me co-write your book for you." And is that how you would
Yes,
participate?
that's how you would participate. Yes, as a go either a ghostwriter or a co-author. People don't really remember you if you're the co-author, is what I found. You know, they only remember the person whose primary name is on the book at the end of the day.
So you were not mentioned in these books.
My name was on the cover of these books, but people don't really recall that I did it because the book is focused on that celebrity and that other person.
Got it. Got it. No, I know Janet, as I mentioned, she's written several New York Times best-selling books. I mean, her branding is I write New York Times best-selling books, not I ghostwrite. I write New York Times best-selling books. That's her positioning, and that's
Right.
why she gets huge advances to write these books. And it's a matter of her positioning. She positioned herself as a Tiffany box. Obviously, you're of that caliber because you've received some major advances to write books on the behalf of these celebrities. And what was the roadmap to get there? Did they find you or did you seek them out?
I actually sought them out back then and formed those relationships. And so I encourage people, no matter where they are in the whole writing spectrum, to just keep building those relationships and those connections, because you never know when it's going to be an important one in your own life.
And I think Harvey McKay wrote a book, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. Probably one of the best titles of a book I recall. It's like, okay, pay your dues, get your connections solid, because at some point you may need help. And as humans, it's just smart people management.
It is. It is. And
And
Harvey's very skilled at such things like that. That's great.
yeah, oh yeah, I've read his books. I mean, I don't even know if he's around anymore, but he wrote some.
He still is. He still is. He's in his 90s, but yes, he's still got a newspaper column that goes out all over the United States every week. So pretty amazing.
Does he's still syndicated?
Still syndicated, yes.
Wow, good for him. Newspapers, my gosh, that sounds like an antique word. But I grew up with
people are still reading them. You know, they're still around. So he's still doing it. It's great.
Good for him. Now, tell us about your current book.
Yeah, my current book is called 10 Publishing Myths, Inside Secrets Every Author Needs to Succeed. And I really wrote this book, Mitch, because I deal with authors all the time at Morgan James, and I find many of them have completely unrealistic expectations about what's going to happen with their book. Because I've been in publishing for so long, I understand that there's so much of the process that's outside of our control as authors. So, like, I can't make a bookstore buy your book, for example. All I can do is tell that bookstore about the book and that it's available out there. So what I really tried to do in this book is I hear these unrealistic expectations all the time. So I picked 10 of them and I wrote chapters about them, like my book will make a lot of money, or my publisher will market and sell my book.
Right.
Well, yeah, your publisher is invested in your book. Don't get me wrong, but what they're going to be able to do is much divided than you're going to be able to do as the author. And so I encourage in each chapter, I really encourage authors to take practical actions that they can do. And I at the end of each chapter, I have an MBA. I call it a myth buster action that they can take to actually do something practical. So, like, I mean, I have authors that tell me, well, my platform is over on Facebook, or my platform is over on LinkedIn or YouTube. Well, those are great, but in the business, we call those rented platforms, because
Correct.
I don't control those platforms.
And they can cut you off anytime they choose.
in a heartbeat. And so instead, you're better off as an author building your platform on your own website, your own blog, your own newsletter, some things that you can control. And so I really want people to be able to get this book, Mitch. So I set up a website. If they go to publishingoffer.com, they can get this book for only $10, including the shipping, along with over $200 worth of free bonuses that they get from me. Now, these aren't just rinky-dink bonuses. For example, I have an audio interview in these bonuses of an author that sold thousands of copies of his book to public libraries. People don't even think about libraries. Libraries have money to buy books.
Yes.
And so what this author did, he found a list of libraries, and then he took an hour or two every day, and he called these librarians and pitched his book and told them about the benefits of them. And they said, "That's a great book. I'll take one, or I'll take 5, or however many they take." And so he would package them up with a little invoice and send them off every day.
Was this recent, or was this a while back?
This is a while back, but still, any of us could do that kind of thing today. It's hard work, but
Right.
if you do the work, it'll come back to you. And so that's what this author did.
Well, I love the idea of libraries, because I interviewed a man, a few weeks ago, and he had two New York Times best-selling books. Now, this man was very well heeled financially. He sent 2 copies of his books, had a team send out 2 copies of his books to every library in America.
Wow.
And that cost him $220,000, I think was the investment. I think it was more, but he was shy to even share it, because New York Times obviously is the Harvard of publishing. Once you get there, you've arrived. I mean,
Sure.
that's an incredible badge. That's like going to Harvard for us as educated. But he did that to so I love the library angle, and that pushed the algorithm of sales. Nobody knows exactly, from what I've heard, about the New York Times bestseller list, except it's at least 8,000 copies in a week, is what I've heard over and over again.
Yes.
What do you think of that strategy?
Well,
Expensive.
it's expensive, and I don't know how it would really work in some ways. You know, would the librarians add those to their stacks, or would
Yes.
they put them out in the free books that people give libraries all the time?
He said a combination of both, because this was recent. This wasn't too long ago. This was recent. And he said in some cases they put it on the shelf because they felt guilty, and it was nice. It was hardcover. And then in some cases they put it out free, but it forced consumption, because then people would talk about it, created virality, because the topic was so hot and the book cover was great, and he tested it, did his research in advance, and forced himself New York Times. He did it twice. 2 New York Times
Wow.
best-selling books. That's
amazing.
He had a buyout, a 9-figure buyout of one of his tech companies. So money was no object to him. He wanted the recognition, and he paid for it. And last question, New York Times bestseller. What's a different route than the one I mentioned?
It can happen organically, even to get on the New York Times list, or at least the USA Today Wall Street Journal bestseller list. One of our books at Morgan James was actually number 66 last week on the USA Today bestseller list. And I understand from David Hancock that is organic. In other words, they just had, they started talking about the book early. They worked on pre-sales. They had a newsletter, all those kinds of things to encourage people to buy the book. And so it can be organic. You don't have to pay a lot of money in order to be able to do that at the end of the day.
Okay, so it can be organic, but there are tactics that need to be in play in order to achieve that pinnacle.
I definitely are. Let me tell you about one more giveaway I have for your listeners here, Mitch. When I put this book, 10 Publishing Myths, together, Alice Kreider, who is an acquisitions editor who endorsed my book, she wrote me and said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, I'll bite, Alice. What's the 11th myth? She said, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show. And I thought, that's a pretty big myth. So what I decided to do is I decided to write that chapter. And then because, you know, I mean, Oprah Winfrey has this warehouse in Chicago where people give her stuff, and she organizes it all and then gives it away a couple of times a year. So if that's where you want your book to be, fine. But I think there's some more effective things that you can do than mailing a book to Oprah Winfrey. So I give that chapter away to people. If they go to terrylinks.com /11th myth, 11th myth, if you put your first name and email address in there, you get that chapter completely free for me for 10 publishing myths here.
So Oprah's show is no longer, though.
Well, she's still talking about books, though. She's still interviewing people. She's still got the Sunday Soul and all the online things that she does. So she's still doing things. People still, I'm sure, send her books for her for the O magazine and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's an interesting tactic and or myth, but that's the acquisition lady. Interesting story. Well, Terry, you've been a fantastic guest. I know your time is valuable. You've got publishingoffer.com, which is where people can pick up your book for $10 and all the bonuses. I'm going to take action on this because I know that oftentimes the bonuses are even more valuable than the intended product. And some of these are, so, you know, I was in the infomercial business. So I know that from my past is say, some of these bonuses drive the sales more than the actual product that's being demoed. So I'm going to embrace it. Everybody else can embrace it. I would love to have you back as a guest because the wealth of information that you have been able to accumulate over these years begets a second interview. And I would love to extend that formally to you on the air for next time.
That's fantastic, Mitch. I'd love to do that.
All right. Thank you for your time today, Terry.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Amazing Authorities Podcast. If today's episode inspired you, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more experts like you rise to the top. For behind-the-scenes access and free resources to boost your authority, head to MitchCarson.com. Until next time, stay amazing.